we've got our quorum here, so we'll start the meeting. Welcome to you all. We have, at the beginning of the meeting, there was no public forum, so no public forum today. We have apologies from His Worship the Mayor and Councillors Lord, Staines and Wiley, and I think that's about it. I'll move from the chair that they are accepted. It's seconded by Councillor Hawkins. I'll put those all in favour, please say aye. Against, that's carried. Confirmation of the agenda. Would somebody like to move the agenda be confirmed as it's outlined in the order paper? Councillor Peet has moved and Councillor Calvert has seconded that. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, that's carried. Just to be aware of the declaration of interest on item 4, and we move very quickly to item 5, business satisfaction survey results, and the report from Mr. Pickford and Mr. Christie. And we have both of those gentlemen here today, and also Mr. Liggett Fraser. Welcome to you. All right, questions, councillors? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question just around the invitations and response rates, in that we have a decreasing number of invitees as time goes on. Is that because we're not inviting the same people twice and the overall pool of customers is diminishing over time?
Through the chair, I suppose the less invites we've sent out is reflective of perhaps the level of activity you might have had in that period as well. Interestingly, the response rate is similar each time. Obviously, we want to try and issue as many invites as we can. And as you say, it does sort of reflect the fact that we don't want to constantly bombard people with invites. We don't want to keep serving the same people. So we do an exercise each survey to make sure that we're not hitting the same people that we hit the previous time. But obviously we are dependent on people taking the time to fill the survey in. And we do encourage people as much as we can, but it is obviously dependent on their time.
Mm-hmm. So the pool of available people is anyone who has had an interaction with any of these departments over the previous, say, roughly 6-month period, or the period since the last survey? That's right. Okay, thank you.
Just in addition to that, the first survey actually undertook a 12-month period of assessment for the interaction we have with businesses. So it's slightly higher.
Councillor McTavish.
Thank you. Just a question on items clauses 22, 23, in relation to the case management initiative. In 23 or 22 refers to it as taking care of small business case management initiative, which would suggest it's focused on businesses. But 23 seems to indicate that it's a more widely available service to community projects or events, which I assume are potentially run by not-for-profits or other such organisations, even informal community groups, and just wondered, what the clarity, or whether we could get some clarity around that.
Through the chair, I suppose when we initially had that idea and the feedback that we'd got from the community, the business community, primarily through this survey, was that they wanted to understand more about the council process. People's feedback was that obviously there are lots of hoops to jump through, and we came up with the idea of a case management service, particularly for businesses, because we wanted to align those hoops so that people really jumped through them in the right order and they weren't missing a hoop on the way through. We launched, had a soft launch for the program, aimed at small business, but I guess the number of times that the CSA came across other circumstances which made them think, well, actually, we could include this group, this event, and it would make sense from a customer point of view to include those as part of that service. So primarily it is aimed at businesses. However, there's numerous groups organising things, non-for-profits, and there's been some examples recently of the work that went on around the rugby and the pavilions in the Octagon and the road closure. And so we, from a case management point of view, we introduced that service to help those customers through that process. So it's really aimed at anywhere where you might have multiple touch points across council where we can add value.
Does that mean that once you get to I'm not sure what the next phase from a soft launch is, full launch, once you get to full launch, it might be called something that perhaps reflects the broader suite of focuses?
Potentially, that's something we would look at as at the end of the review when we gather our feedback from that initial pilot. Then we would look at that. But I guess, we might look at a service, but we would actually, we might brand it differently for different groups. You might say, well, this is how we might do it for businesses. This is what you might do for event organisers. So it's the same service, but it might have a different face, as it were, into those particular groups who might need it.
Super. Thank you.
I'm just looking at when this started, Simon, where you said the survey will help gauge where things have improved and identify areas that still need to be addressed, and that's clearly some of what you've been doing. And it goes on to say, more importantly, the survey marks the start of an ongoing quarterly report which will track the satisfaction of business people who've used the DCC's services. And that was November last year. Are we no longer intending to provide a quarterly business report, or we're just providing it quarterly but a year in arrears, or are we going to be able to achieve carrying out what you thought you were then, or was that optimistic? What's happened to your vision that said we will be reporting quarterly to businesses starting from November?
Sure. Through the chair, I think the vision remains the same. We do want to have more dialogue with businesses, and for that dialogue to be two-way. The original idea was to have a quarterly survey. We have found it a challenge, would you believe, to extract the data from the various databases that we have, because we want to make sure that we're not surveying the same people time and time again. So I guess we could have done better in terms of our timeliness. The current survey, the fourth survey is just about to go out, or maybe has gone out? Just gone out. So we will deliver on our promise to keep it quarterly from now on, I guess. We would have liked to have done that, but it proved to be more technically challenging than we thought it would be. But I guess the original vision of identifying where we can do better, we still thoroughly believe in, and we believe we've managed to make quite a significant areas of progress across the board when it comes to that two-way dialogue and building those relationships with business.
So would we, how timely would we expect the results of the survey that's just happened? I mean, I've been asking after this one since February. So the fact that it's just closed now, this one closed on the 11th of December, that one that I started asking about in February, just wondering whether the one that closed now might be reported back on, or businesses might hear back or whatever more quickly than that, or?
Yeah, we should be able to report it back more quickly. The survey that's just gone will be open for a period of time. Then when that closes off, the analysis then is undertaken, which can take up to a couple of weeks depending on the availability of the person that undertakes that for us. And from that point, we're able to report that back as quickly as we can. So
we'd expect it sort of within a month of the end of the quarterly period?
I think that would be a reasonable assumption. Yeah, within a month's achievable.
Yeah. And just something else that I find quite interesting is that in December, people really were not very pleased with our services one way or another, sort of across the board here and there. And I just wondered whether we have any inkling of why that might have been.
Through the chair, we had discussions about this internally around why we saw that dip, and it is quite marked, as you point out. We don't have an answer. I guess the next survey that we undertake currently will hopefully show us a more overall a good trend. But I guess looking at the quantitative and the qualitative side equally, I mean, the quantitative stuff gives us an idea in terms of percentage satisfaction, which is fine, but the figure on its own doesn't really tell the story. The things that we found really invaluable, both in John's area and in my regulatory area, is the verbatim comments. The things that have come out of those have been, for us, the gold, the things that actually have informed our next step, whether it's the how we approach our customer service generally in terms of having a customer solutions manager rather than just a manager of the CSA, how we approach our case management project. All of those things have arisen through that feedback, the qualitative stuff rather than purely the quantitative. So next time we're hoping for a reasonable set of data that will show us a trend overall. But yeah, as in that previous survey, why we don't really know.
And just one last one. Is there any reason why you wouldn't, in somewhere like Dunedin, keep asking the same people? Because in some respects, if you asked them and they were having a bad experience and you tried to respond and try and fix things, then it's worth asking them again, and then they can reflect on that, hey, yes, it happened better this time than last time, or whatever. Is there a problem with asking the same people over and over again, if that's...
No, we had a bit of discussion about that internally and decided that we would not survey more than twice a year. So if they'd had a dealing with council in 2 consecutive quarters, we would wait until the 3rd quarter before we went back. It's just really to make sure the response rates stay high, and we'd hope that we'd be capturing that data in the long term anyway. Yeah, we'll still be surveying them. Yep.
Yeah, well, my question just follows on really from Councillor Calvert, and it's just really how have you given some thought how you could increase the numbers of the responses and the invites, and how we can encourage the numbers so that the results are more meaningful?
Yeah, we'll see quite a lot of effort's gone into capturing the data for us to be able to conduct the survey. Enterprise Dunedin is a very good example whereby we didn't have a CRM that we could easily pull the information together. This latest survey that's just gone out, our survey numbers have gone to around about 200 businesses, so we'd expect to see a marked increase in those that are being surveyed. And the response rates are pretty good in terms of the industry averages for the return rates. We'll keep monitoring that to make sure that it does remain high, and if it doesn't, we'll look to change the way we incentivise those people returning the surveys.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question around the building consents area and the increased better performance in terms of processing. So page 7, number 21A, and my question is around the fact that in the past we've contracted out to process some of the consents. And I'm just wondering to what extent we're still doing that, or have we, because of the extra FTEs there, we're not doing it now?
Through the chair, we currently, from memory, have about 22 consents currently outsourced. The situation overall with consents has dramatically improved since March, as you'll see from the figures. However, it's still unacceptable that we are 13% of our consents are over the 20 days. I believe within the next 2 weeks we'll be under 20 days. So by the end of the month we'll be in a position where we are meeting our statutory time frame. We want to try and reduce and bring to zero the number of consents we're sending out to other BCAs to process. There is an overhead, obviously, to that process of sending them out, and we just want to keep the work within Dunedin. The long-term goal and the vision for that team is to become a net processor of consents, so that we actually are able to provide the service for others. So, as I say, we currently have around 20, but I'd like to see that reduced to zero. certainly by the end of the year. We are currently, we've got some of our resources in place, but we're still recruiting, and the key one is the team leader role, which is a key role within the building consent team in order to deploy the resources in the right way. But we're hopeful by the end of the year we'll be in a position to be a net processor of consents rather than having to outsource.
Just one more, if I may. One more, just in terms of the expertise, in terms of recruitment, that's been difficult in the past. Is it getting better, or is that really a hurdle we've got to cross?
It's an ongoing hurdle. I think we to attract and retain suitably qualified trained staff is a challenge for many BCAs, as you'll have read. Many other councils are in the same position as us, and actually many are in a worse position than we are. So we have identified, I guess, some short term in that we are outsourcing where we need to, and we are doing overtime and things. But what I guess we want to get to is get some cadets and actually train people up internally. And so you're actually building some capacity within the BCA, and you're actually training people at the same time. It's not something we've traditionally done. We haven't sort of grown our own talent internally. We've tended to rely on people coming in from the outside, but we've identified that in the medium to long term is the way to go. And we think that for Dunedin will be a good thing overall anyway.
Okay, if there's no further questions, there's a recommendation that the report be noted. If someone would like to move that, Councillor Benson-Pope has moved, seconded by Councillor Hawkins. No debate on it at all? If not, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, that's carried. Righto. Well, items of interest, I guess, for the next meeting, yeah. Are there any items at all that should be considered by the chair in the next meeting? If not, I will move now that we go into committee to discuss the confidential agenda. I'll move that. Councillor Hawkins, seconded. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, that's carried.